Please turn to page 244 and 245 for the kindergarten schedule. This basically has 2 pages that you need to look at as we review the schedule and where the 4 components of writing are embedded in it. On the left side is the actual schedule that you could show your children. This is a starting point. This is not your schedule, and I realize that. It's just to give you an example of a schedule. It's a starting point, it's a benchmark, and then you would create a hybrid of your own schedule. On the right side of the page are descriptors of each part of the schedule that you'll show the children so that you can actually go back and kind of read up on what am I teaching in each one of those schedules, or what does this part of the schedule entail. Let's now go through and identify the different parts of the schedule where we will put those 4 components of writing. Please go to 820 to 840. This is the story of the week, or the focus text. I'm going to put in this little book here, LA, for language arts. Now, the focus text is the text, the story, or the informational text that you are reading to your students, and you're focusing on it for an entire week. Now, that means that you're going to have activities that you do before this story or informational text. Then you'll read the story or informational text, and then after the story, you'll have some sort of writing connected to it. That's your focus text. That's what you're selecting to look at for the whole week. I like to choose a narrative one week, and then another week I like to switch to informative explanatory text, informational text, and go back and forth, all under the umbrella of a unit of study. So one week I may be reading a narrative like The 3 Little Pigs. The next week we may be using different expository text or informative explanatory text in order to read about the farm, and that will be our focus text for that week. Switching back and forth between narrative and informative explanatory text will help you cover those different types of writing, will help you cover those different types of reading, and connect it to language development and writing as well. During this focus text time, you can be reading a narrative story to your students or informative explanatory text. I like switching back and forth. One week I focus on a narrative, another week informative explanatory text, under the same umbrella of a unit of study, like for instance, a theme of the farm, and then we'll read stories and read information. This time period here is for you to use that focus text to teach students comprehension skills. What's wonderful about this time period is you're going to have a before reading, during reading, and then after reading time period during the week. In this language arts time that you're using a focus text, I can embed some of my language development activities. Before reading your focus text of the week, if you're reading a narrative, then you're going to want to introduce the vocabulary using that wonderful activity, Word Masters to Movie Scripts. So let's put here, narrative, and underneath this story of the week, the focus text, let's put informative explanatory text. If you're reading a narrative, then before you read the story at the beginning of the week, you need to introduce to the students the vocabulary. You can use Word Masters to Movie Scripts for before reading. What does that satisfy? Vocabulary development. You're pulling robust vocabulary out of that focus text, and then the next thing that you're doing is you are embedding it into a movie script. It's that narrative storytelling that you're embedding those vocabulary words in. So you're building on that ability for students to tell a story, a narrative. This is a fabulous activity that is going to build language, and it's embedded in your language arts time. During the reading of the story is exactly that. That's where you are reading aloud the story and you are focusing on comprehension skills. Just a heads up, I have all those comprehension skills and how you teach that in my reading book for kinder and first grade. After reading the story, one of your activities is the Come Alive box. The Come Alive box is when you are choosing a character, maybe even the setting of the story, and now you're going to write a description of that character and the setting so that the character comes alive. This bridges character analysis as well as descriptive writing together with the story in your language arts time. It will also help your children become better narrative writers because they'll be able to describe a character in the story using these strategies. Now let's look at this language arts time where you are looking at the story of the week, the focus text, but this time, instead of a narrative, you're using informative explanatory text. Before reading informative explanatory text, you want to provide students with background about that information. So we would use lecture notes. Now, lecture notes not only provide background, but they also teach students how to write information. After the lecture notes, the next activity you would do is content diagrams. This is for you to pull the topical or content vocabulary words specific to the content that you're studying so that the students can actually understand those vocabulary words. And that ends up becoming descriptive expository writing. With lecture notes, you will provide background for the students so when they get to the text, they actually have the background in order to hook on and have more comprehension. And the content diagram is so that you're introducing those high-level vocabulary, topical content words so that students can access the meaning of the text without you stopping every few minutes to explain what each word means. And this content diagram will be transformed into a descriptive expository or descriptive informative writing. These two activities will provide your students with that before background knowledge and vocabulary. Then you would read the text. So that would be your during. So let me just put D here for during. And what are you doing? You're focusing again on comprehension. In my reading, Kinder First Grade Reading Manual, I cover how to teach that comprehension. After reading, you can have your students connect what they have learned during this focus text into their writing. I love to make this an interactive writing big book. In other words, if my students have been learning a lot from this informative explanatory text about all types of farm animals, then we would brainstorm, then we would plan, which I would do the planning and help them through it by making an organizer. And then we would have our interactive time where the students would come up, different students would come up and write the story on the board. Other students would have whiteboards in their lap to do writing. And then we would publish each page into a big book. I use the, after reading, we would plan and write this big book over several days. Notice I have interactive writing right after this story of the week. So if I happen to be writing about information we learned during this focus story time, and in other words, if I was writing about the farm and we were planning and brainstorming and writing, it would take several days to do this, maybe 3 or 4 days. So what would I do? I would continue this activity during my interactive writing time. So now let's go back. It's the end of the week. Maybe it's Thursday, Friday. We've learned through our reading so much information about the farm. Now we're going to spend that Thursday or Friday brainstorming about the farm during our focus text. The following week, during my interactive writing time, we will then be writing and publishing the big book about the farm. We could be brainstorming information after that informative explanatory story, but the next week we may be going on to reading a narrative, yet we still need to write and publish that big book about the farm. Well, the following week, look at your schedule. During interactive writing time, we will write and publish that informative text that we brainstormed on. So during interactive writing time, this is when the students and you are planning, writing, and publishing big books. Whenever you finish a unit of study about information, you will then use many days of interactive writing in order to write and publish a big book about the information they have learned. Once they have finished writing about all that information, then, and now we're jumping to our interactive writing, then you would have kids write narratives. So I'm going to erase this now. Let's now look again at this interactive writing time. This is for informative explanatory writing. When do you do the informative explanatory writing? After you finished a whole week of your focus text being informative explanatory. Just like I had said to you previously, we read all about the farm, brainstormed about it. The following week, we wrote an informative explanatory big book about the farm. If they don't have information to write about, then we write narratives. During this interactive writing time, though, always keep in mind, you and the students are going to plan and talk, always bringing in that oral language piece. And then different students will come up to write up on the board, or students will have whiteboards in their laps to write. And then you will take it to publishing. I usually like to write 1 page a day, and then we publish that page as well. We have taken all of our language activities and embedded them into the story of the week. And we also have our component of interactive writing. That's the we do it. The language components were put into the focus text, the story of the week, the language arts time. At 10:30 to 10:35 on this schedule, we have the teacher write. This is the I do it. This is where you will model to students how to plan, talk, and write out narratives, informative explanatory, or opinion writing. Now let's look at the you do it part of our writing components, and that is what we have here, guided writing or instructional level writing, where students are going to be working with you in small groups. So these small groups could be the pre-emergent, the emergent, or the beginner level groups. And these will take students from the one-word level to one sentence, and finally, independently writing 1 or more sentences. These small group activities are going to accelerate your students' progress because you're focusing on exactly what skills they need to learn to move them to the next level of writing. These are 3 different types of groups, so notice I have alphabet jobs right next to that. These are independent activities that your students are doing, the alphabet jobs, so they are practicing what they learned about the alphabet. So it could be just letter matching activities, it could be sound to letter matching activities, it could be writing word activities. There's a range of activities that you would give different students to independently practice. Independent work is all about practice, practice. So I have to provide students with work that they can actually independently do and that they need to practice. So during this time, we will have you polling a group to do small group writing, and then other students would be practicing alphabet work that they need to work on. This is a great time for you to have an instructional aid if you have one. I realize in this small group time, we have a wide range of classrooms. Sometimes teachers are on their own the entire day. That's why I made these homogeneous types of groups, the pre-emergent, emergent, and beginner, because you can pull a small group, but you could have up to 15 kids in the group. So that way, you're not pulling 5 kids, 5 kids, 5 kids, and you feel like I'm never getting to a child. These groups are tailored for specific skills. You also could have this as a time period if you do have help coming into the room where one person could be doing a small group, and then you're doing a small group, you have fewer numbers of children doing independent work. And you could rotate through these small groups and get to more children every day. This is your schedule kindergarten, where I've embedded the language, the I do it, the we do it, and the you do it components of writing.